Hello everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Textbook. Today we've got our great Director of Studies, Andy, is coming back to us today. And so welcome, Andy.
Hi everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And today our topic is partnering a good way to improve your English? Okay, so the first thing I want to ask you, Andy, is can you tell us exactly what is partnering?
Partnering is basically a stage in the classroom where students are talking to each other or checking their answers, and the teacher is in the background. He or she is just listening.
Okay, and so why is it good? Perhaps you can tell us first from a student's perspective. Why?
Well, I find it one of the most effective stages, simply because there's so many advantages to it. From the student's perspective, it gives learners more opportunities to speak. It's just compared to open class feedback when the teacher nominates a student and then student B and student C. It takes time. The teacher doesn't have the time to talk to every single student, the length he'd like to, right? But when there's a pair work activity, students can talk freely.
Yeah, and you know what is something that I learned when I started to get into teaching English was that whole notion of, okay, now I want you to check your answers with your partner. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of people who will say, oh, but they'll just cheat. But that's not what that's about.
Oh, not at all.
So tell us about that.
I think it is not cheating. This is not about that anymore. We are not at high school here. I think with the spotlight taken off the teacher, it's students will feel more relaxed. They will be empowered. They will feel relaxed to make mistakes, and I think that's extremely important. The first step is that they will be ready to make mistakes with their partners.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting also, because I think you said a very key phrase there, taking the spotlight off the teacher, because I think in very traditional learning it was always, okay, the students sit and they don't talk.
Oh, yeah.
And they write their answers, and then the teacher collects in their information and their homework or whatever it is, and they mark it right or wrong. And then it moved to the next stage where the teacher actually would maybe not mark it right or wrong, but actually send it back to the student, and the student would then have to answer the incorrect ones themselves, and so on. I know there's a good side to that, which means that the teacher is really aware of every single student's weak spots and strengths, but it did nothing to improve their confidence, like you said. And it made the teacher way too dominant in terms of right or wrong.
And it can be biased as well.
Right?
Because when a student engages in a conversation with the teacher, it's just they're more aware of the fact that is the teacher they're talking to, right? Whereas with other students, again, they can make mistakes. They can explore. They can find territories they have never been to before.
That's right.
In terms of English, obviously.
Yes, but I think that's the other second really important thing is that they feel more comfortable to make mistakes. So if they get with that partner, they'll say, "Why did you put C instead of B?" They can sit there and justify it, but they would probably never fight to the bitter end with their teacher. They'd be too scared to do that. But they will, and again, it's again in English, and so it's giving them so many more opportunities to actually practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So from that you were talking about the student's perspective, what about the teacher's perspective?
I think it's a window to what students are really thinking about, their real worries, their
Yeah.
real, even their mistakes, right? So we can adjust our lesson plan or add extra activities if necessary based on what the students say, based on the things the students say. It's a very student-centered lesson plan, and there's room for adjustment.
Yeah, I think that's the key point there, student-centered. It's again moving away from that traditional approach of the teacher being the person who is the center of the room, who knows all things. And it's nice because nowadays students feel so much more empowered with their own learning, and they can go so much further now than they did before. And I think we can see that just generally in education, not just in English, but in everything now, students are so much more encouraged to be empowered to take charge of their learning than they used to do.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, but what do you see as perhaps, okay, we've talked about the great things about it. What do you see as the problems that, for example, students might face?
I think an open class feedback stage is still very important, and teacher can base nomination on effective monitoring and on pair work, and thanks to this, students can have a positive experience, right? So when it's an open class feedback stage, students have to speak in front of their classmates, in front of their teachers. It's a very difficult thing to do that in a foreign language, right?
Exactly.
So based on effective monitoring, a teacher can choose who to nominate, and therefore not. It's a very embarrassing moment, right? When you nominate someone, I think it has happened to everyone. When you nominate someone, they just don't know the answer, right? And you're sitting there and, okay, so what should I do next? Right? Should I nominate someone else? Should I wait? Should I? And
You mean from the teacher's side?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can eliminate that.
Yeah.
That embarrassing.
Yeah. And also, as sort of saying, there are the students in the class who know that time is about to come where the teacher's going to ask everybody questions, and they're going to have this look on their face of don't pick me, don't pick me, oh, just pick me. So so I mean, looking at the positive side of partnering is it gets them to still practice in a confident situation rather than to be having to be in the spotlight out there. So what about within?
It's there's just one more thing I wanted to add here, because I think there's a very important part here that students might not listen to each other when they're when they are doing pair work or in smaller groups. So I think it's a great idea to ask them to report back on each other, right? So they shouldn't talk about themselves, but they should talk about their partners. So this way, they're basically forced to listen to each other, which is the key.
And actually, just a classic elementary one example of that is when you ask the person they're in partners, what's your name, where are you from, how old are you? Okay, so they've done that part. And then they have to report back, and they have to use a whole other lot of language. His name is, he's from, and so on, using the other language. So it shows also that there's different kinds of language used for different situations as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you're doing a double whammy on that one. Yeah. But I think also, as you say, there could be students who talk to each other, and what about the situation where you've got two guys, one of them is really strong and always gets the answers pretty much right, and then you've got the guy next to him who's just gone to sleep, and so their partnering work is about person B basically copying the answers of person A. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
From the stronger student's perspective, it's still practice, right? It's not like there's no 100%, there's no perfection here, so it's still practice, and through explaining and practicing more, they will master that given skill even better. From the weaker student's perspective, it's still practice of some sort. It's still, they have to copy it, and they have to wake up.
and also, I mean, sooner or later that the feeling in the class will be, don't partner with that guy because he never listens, and so he's just kind of losing out with that.
But also, especially when moving to a new country, sometimes this laziness doesn't it doesn't come from actual laziness. It's just a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
So partnering and getting to know other students can actually help that.
Yeah.
And I've seen it before.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
You know,
and actually, I think
we can turn this around.
Yeah. The further people get into their language learning using partnering, I just have found that tends to happen less the further down the track, because they have gained confidence, and sometimes they may want to partner with someone who is obviously better than them, so they can learn from them, you know, in a genuine way.
Yeah.
And there's always the lazy bones people who are just good for nothings, who are not going to ever be anything anyway, but that's life. But also, how do you see the teacher's role in that kind of, when there are problems in partnering?
Well, the teachers should be aware of these classroom mechanisms. Should be aware of, anticipating problems, and try to find the right pairs and move them around.
That's right. Yeah, and I know it's easy for a teacher to say, okay, turn to the person next to you, but maybe they're always sitting next to that guy, you
Exactly.
know. But yeah, and then there's a whole other kind of teaching strategy of how do you pair these people up?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of other techniques used with that. And actually, that's a really great way for students in the class to get to know each other.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
Particularly if you are not speaking the same language, your first language is not the same. They may be shy to talk to that person who only speaks Japanese, and they only speak Arabic. They're like, oh, I'd like to talk to that person, but how? I don't know how. But if the teacher says, okay, you from Japan, you from Saudi Arabia, you're going to partner.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
they often say, okay. And then next thing you know, they're chit-chatting, having a laugh. They realize they got more in common than they realized. They go and have a coffee together, da-da-da-da. So there's a lot of other positive spin-offs.
Oh, definitely. It can facilitate out of classroom meetings, activities, which is still learning, right?
Yeah, which actually takes me to the next part, which is outside of the classroom. You know, okay, that's a technique, partnering inside the classroom. Do you have any ideas for students outside the classroom, how they can continue that?
I always tell my students that they should do the things they normally do. So they shouldn't try to do things they don't like, because that they won't like English. If they like playing computer games, they should try to play with games that they're online games, and they meet people from all over the world. If they like, I don't know, going to concerts, then they should find like-minded people to go with. So it's well, I always tell my students English is not just in the classroom, but more importantly, it's outside the classroom. That's when the magic happens.
Yeah, actually, that's when the magic happens.
because I think learners don't really realize that's learning as well, right? And then I'm a non-native speaker myself, and I lived in England for quite some time when I was 14, and I hated school. It was horrible. But then at the end of that period of time, I was significantly better, and it felt like magic.
Yeah,
because I didn't really do anything. I was lazy.
So you because you were in England, you were basically forced to speak English, and that's why you managed to become so fluent. I guess. I mean, it's a huge contributor
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. And actually, I think, and I like what you say about, don't try and do something you're not interested in, because it's going to be limited, really, isn't it? You might talk about some subject with some other person in English, but if you're not interested, the conversation's going to end pretty early.
Yeah.
So, and I suppose, I know, and I'm sure you're the same, we get many students who say, teacher, what can I do outside to improve my English? And I think this is exactly where the partnering comes in.
Yeah.
Whoever it is. I mean, I just say, okay, it's a 20-minute walk from here to the railway station.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of students going to the railway station from the school.
Mm-hmm.
Walk with someone who doesn't speak your language.
Yeah.
You only have to do it once, and maybe you find that that's partnering.
Exactly.
You're just finding out about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're interested in doing things together. Maybe you're not. Doesn't matter. But you had a go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about social interactions. Really.
And that's it, isn't it? I mean, that's how people get good at English, really.
Yeah.
Just saying I want it for academic purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's a long journey of socializing in English before that. That's going to help you become competent at that. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So what about that partnering side, long term? Let's say someone has finished their English course, they've even gone to university, they've got their degree, they can speak some English, but they go back to their country and they now have their degree in English and so on, but they're going to be surrounded by Arabic, Japanese or Mandarin or something. How do you see partnering kind of fitting in over at that level of their English?
They need to try to seek opportunities where they can practice English. It's I think we talked about this before, but learning English is a bit like going to the gym, right? So if you go to the gym for 3 months and then stop,
that's right.
Yeah, it's like
nothing. You're gonna do well for 3 months, but then everything's gonna sink right back, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So English I think it's a bit like that.
Yeah.
So my advice would be seek opportunities where you can use English, try to find friends, new friends, expats.
Yeah, and I think maybe the question is also, if you learned English for your job, why? Is that because your job will involve you needing to know English? If that's the case, then in your job, seek out, like you say, opportunities for other people to speak English with them, because that's why you actually learned it in the first place. Or if you're going to be a doctor or an engineer or something, and you go back to your country, you're still going to need all that research you did in English, all that knowledge you have in English. You're still going to have to interact in an international level. Yeah.
And these days you can find plenty of online courses in English.
Yes.
International conferences are all over the world.
Yeah.
And they're all in English.
Yes.
So I think there are plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. Okay, so now that's actually very useful for people. Well, what we're going to do also today, for the first time, is we're going to have a section on our podcast which is called Questions from Our Audience.
Great. I'm glad to be the first one.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, just to let you know, Andy does not know what this question is. He hasn't sat there and prepared an answer. So this is the first question we're going to have, okay? And the question is from a student. His name is Ayman Omar.
Okay.
And he's a student at Elite Language Centre.
All right.
And he's following our podcasts, and he's telling everybody to follow it too. And now he'll definitely tell everybody to follow it, because he's going to be on it. His question's on it. Okay, so he sent me an email. It said, my question is, I have bought a novel. This novel is for advanced English readers, and I'm still in pre-intermediate 3. I've read about 15 pages so far, and I've found more than 20 words that I don't understand. Do you think it's better to read an advanced book like that, or should I stop reading this novel until I get to that advanced level of reading?
20 words and
He said
15 pages?
15 pages, he said 20 words.
Oh, that's great.
Only 20?
Only 20? That's great.
Yeah.
Don't stop, Ayman. Keep reading. It's great. I think it's really important to to read English, but more importantly, read in English, but more importantly, encounter authentic language.
Yeah.
And it's no matter how hard it is, it doesn't seem to be that hard.
Well, if he's got through 15 pages and he only found 20 words he didn't understand,
that's great.
I think he's doing really well.
Yeah.
There used to be a saying which is, if in one page you cannot understand 5 words, then it may be too hard for you in one page. So if he's only found 20 and 15 pages,
that's still great.
Yeah. And actually, I think the good thing to know, Ayman, is that this is actually how people get better at learning English. If you only did what your teacher told you to do, you'd do okay. But people like you are the people who are going to do very well because you're taking that extra step and challenging yourself.
Yeah,
definitely. And you may have read 15 pages and the 20 words you didn't understand, but now you're going to understand them because I'm assuming you have a dictionary next to you and you're looking them up as you go along. And I think that helps a lot. The other thing is that a novel is different to reading a non-fiction book. If you read a non-fiction book and you find a lot of words you don't understand, that's quite challenging, but still it can be done. But a novel is really about telling a story, and often when you get into the story, the desire to know what happens next or whatever actually pushes you to try to understand that word.
Definitely.
Far faster. So actually, if you're really into novels, it's actually a really great way to get your vocabulary up. Yeah.
Keep up the good work, Ayman.
Yeah, Ayman, thank you so much for this question.
Thank you.
And thank you, Andy, also for answering the question.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And also I'd like to say to also our listeners, if there's anyone else who would like to send a question in, we want to say please do that. Please email me at info, that's INFO, at elitelc.com, and we will put your question on our podcast, and we will also inform you when it's on. So again, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Ayman, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.